The Colbert Report is taking political satire to a new level, winning numerous awards, climbing the ratings, beating both Letterman and Leno, and being second now only to The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Colbert exploits and exposes the bigots, the ignorant, the pompous, and the hypocrites by being exactly that in his right-wing gonzo-style comedy performance and persona as a news anchor on his own show. This is the Colbert Report. Today we're going to talk about the craft of creating your old cool cult comedy show with a great cultural footprint. And this is a show that even convinced Henry Kissinger to be in a music video with Daft Punk. And to help us today are two of the centerpieces that make the Colbert Report work. She is the co-executive producer. She's bringing experiences from shows such as The Rosie O'Donnell Show, The Daily Show, VH1 Storytellers, and Inside Edition. Here's a picture of her, by the way, with her little golden friend, the Emmy. And here she is. Please welcome Meredith Bennett. Hi. You're over here in this chair. He started out as an aficionado of comedy, then started writing comedy himself and doing improv. This is what he said only 6 years ago when asked about his future.
I would like to continue to write and support myself writing. I mean, it's amazing that I get to do this for a living, and sometimes it's for the, some show on MTV, and sometimes it's for Tom Green on MTV. I don't get to choose necessarily between the good and the bad, but I get to do it, and that's much more amazing than fucking flipping burgers at In-N-Out or something.
And so he did, not the flipping of burgers, but he rose from receptionist to staff writer on a show called The Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn. Then he wrote for the new Tom Green Show, and only a year ago he was appointed head writer for the Colbert Report. Please welcome Opus Moreschi. You're over there. Yes, yes. He's still on the fumes of jet lag and the Danish climate. So, thanks for coming over. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you.
Meredith, could you tell us a little bit about the genesis of the Colbert Report? How did it all start?
Well, basically, it started based on a promo idea that was on The Daily Show. And Stephen Colbert was a correspondent on The Daily Show, as some of you may know. And they were doing a funny bit about a promo for a show called The Colbert Report, and about a right-wing pundit. And then essentially, they thought some more about it and thought we should actually make a show, because people actually were calling The Daily Show to say, when's this coming on? And that was the genesis for it.
And it was, how would you describe, if people haven't seen the show, how would you describe the Colbert Report? What kind of show is it?
Oh, geez. This is, I try and explain it to my grandparents every time, and they never quite get it. It's a satire of punditry shows. Well, The Daily Show is a satire of straight-up news in America. There's so much right now that is punditry, which is news from an opinion, from a point of view, from the left or the right. And so it's a political satire of those sorts of shows.
And I guess, sort of in your hearts, as the makers of the Colbert Report, there's a special place for the Fox News network, if you can call it a news network, but they do. And especially this show called The O'Reilly Factor. Who is Bill O'Reilly?
That's when I have dinner with him and I ask him that question, he's a little elusive. I've never met the man. It's interesting. Like when we started the show, and Meredith can attest to this because I only joined a few years after the show started, but he was the preeminent voice on Fox News. He was a right-wing guy who would, have that same sort of strong emotions about different news stories.
Like Hitler's last fling.
But not that crazy is the thing. He'd be like, I'm really angry about this thing that I'm really angry about. He'd yell at the camera for a while, and people would be like, that's entertaining. But in the 5 years that I've been there, everything has moved so far into so much more theatrics and so much more anger that he seems like this reasonable old man of Fox News now, where he's just like, I'm angry. You're like, oh, Grandpa, that's cute.
I actually worked with Bill O'Reilly on my very first job at Inside Edition, and he was the host of that show back then. And you know, I love the fact that, you know, now I work on a show that makes fun of him and how everything comes full circle. And he pointed that out when he actually was a guest on our show a few years ago, and asked me how it was to you know, I used to work for him and now I work on a show that makes fun of him, and how is that? And I said it's great.
One of life's little rewards, I guess. Yeah. I want to show another clip from the show. This is one of your recurrent segments called The Threat Now. Could you explain what's The Threat Now? The
Threat Now is everything that we do on the show is imbibed with a strong emotion, and much like the punditry news. And so the Threat Down is a numbered list of the things that you need to be scared about this week.
Uh-huh. And these are one of the things we have to be scared about if you go to New York. Let's run the next clip, please. This is a good example of sort of a mix between the satire and the absurdity, I guess, of the humor of the Colbert Report.
Well, I think when we were watching that, and the people saw the statistic that there were more young black men that were actually pulled over than they were living in the city, people laughed because they already know that that's ridiculous. We don't need to like hammer that point home. Uh-huh. And so if we're doing it well, what we do is we take something that is sort of serious and that people can recognize the inherent hypocrisy or ridiculousness of it, and then we just get to be silly with it. So, because making a point is never as much fun as making someone laugh. So.
Yeah. I want to come back to the humor in a little while, but I want to sort of start with the nuts and bolts also. How many shows do you do a year?
We do 100. We tape 160.
Wait, 160.
160 shows. So that's like 20 weeks in each episode, in each season?
We do it over 41 weeks because we tape 4 nights a week.
Right.
And, you know, spread out throughout the year.
So, and you're on at 11:30, Monday through Thursday.
Yeah.
Correct. And then it repeats over and over again.
So how do you structure that production? That's a pretty serious production.
It is. We, we regularly have 10, 12-hour days, and...
do you have the same team doing all of the shows, or do you sort of separate teams for separate shows? No,
we have the same team doing all of the shows.
Yeah, it's much like most television productions. We work until we pretty much can't anymore, and then we collapse long enough to get our, status bar up, our health bar up again. I'm going to use some video game metaphors. I hope that works out.
What are your main sources of health during this process?
Health?
Yeah.
I haven't found them yet. It's not really a focus for me. As long as there's some coffee on hand, that's pretty much all I run on.
Lots of coffee. There are about 90 staff and crew members that make up the group that does this show.
And while I complain about long hours, I'm sitting at a computer just doing this, and there are people that are like lifting lights and putting things, interns, tiny little people that like 19-year-old women like the size of pipe cleaners carrying huge jugs of water up 4 flights of stairs to put into the water thing. So people are doing actual work while I write my little silly jokes.
Be quiet, I'm working.
Yeah, I'm like, how dare you? Your physical labor is disturbing me.
Right. So, how much do you pay attention? Do you have a strict formula? Do you have sort of a thing written down that's like the mission statement of the show, or do you sort of wing it?
We have different segments, like the Threat Down or the Word or that sort of thing, and we plug those in, and we try and get a good mix of some silly and some more sort of serious topics and stuff. But there's no one template for any show. It could be anything, and sometimes if it's an important news day or say a guest drops out last minute, then we have to come up with it all right at the spur of the moment.
Uh-huh.
But I think that the mission statement is as simple as to make people laugh.
Right.
I mean, it is first and foremost a comedy show. And one of my roles, besides executing all of the writer's ideas and Stephen's ideas, is I also have to take care of all the money on the side. And, as Stephen always says to me, make sure all the money goes in the funny. Don't worry so much about how the bathrooms look.
And it's obviously a smart show. Is it a very sort of East Coast, urban show, college kind of show, or is it sort of everyone laughs at it?
I think it appeals to a certain segment of people, and it's funny. There's been studies done that say that conservatives actually really like the show, and I think some people misconstrue that to think that conservatives are fooled that they don't understand that this is a character. But I think what it is they know it's a character,
but they still
they
like
just still
the
like
things
it.
being
Yeah.
said.
Well, because it's
Which
a character.
makes it a little even more sick.
Yeah. Well, I don't speak for Stephen at all, but because he's doing a character on the show, his actual point of view or whatever is not clear, and sometimes even to me, and I've worked with him for 5 years. And so I think a viewer, however they feel about a subject, can watch and enjoy the jokes and just kind of assume that probably if they hung out with him in real life, he'd agree with them.
How much does the network get involved? Comedy Central, you're the person they talk to. It's your responsibility.
Right.
What kind of interaction do you have with them?
I have a daily interaction, but I must say that we're very lucky. We're one of the shows out there in the States that the network is as hands-off as they can absolutely be, and really allows us to do the show that we want to produce. And ultimately, they just end up being a resource for our show in terms of just accessing their attorneys for legal issues and their publicists for dealing with press. So we sort of get the best of both worlds. We get the benefit of going to, our parents when we need something, and then the rest of the time we're able to, really work independently.
I guess your success pretty much helps that relationships a little bit
It
too.
does.
They might call on you often if things weren't going as well.
It's true, and the Daily Shows really set the tone for that since they came first. But really, yes, both our shows are very successful for the network, and so they know not to fix something that's not broken.
Right. I'd like to go now into the humor of the show a little bit, the genealogy, sort of what kind of shows is this show, the family ties. And I've drawn it up into 3 little categories, and I'd like maybe you, Opus, to walk us through, sort of compare and contrast some of these people. I put them into satirists, character comics, then zanies, ranters, and goofballs. There used to be actually a picture of Dennis Leary down there too, and Dennis Miller and Henry Rollins, but never mind. Well, so start with the satirists.
Well, first I'm the hippo. I'm wearing the same color, so that's me. So the satirists, that would be what we got: Bill Maher and John and Michael Moore. That's sort of your classic straight ahead sort of guy with a point of view, talking about his strong opinions and making the jokes about the news. And then your character comics.
Well, let's stay with the satirists a little bit, because the relationship with the Daily Show and Jon Stewart is obviously, it seems to be a very fruitful one and sort of a very joyous one.
Yeah.
How would you compare the two of them as on-screen personas?
I think John is being himself, and I've met him and I've worked with him a little bit, but I don't again speak for him. But I think he's just, he is being he is the voice that the audience wants to be saying. He is vocalizing the things a lot of people get frustrated about, and it is a refreshing thing to watch. And it's an amazing thing when he's saying that exact thing that you didn't even know how to crystallize. And because he provides the show is so great, and it provides such a broad cover. We're like the weird little stepbrother that gets to kind of pipe up afterwards and be silly and ridiculous and not really make any sense. And
watching the two shows, I think one of the differences between the two of them is that underneath all the comedy with Jon Stewart, there seems to be sort of an urge to, even an anger sometimes, or he's indignant about things in society. And with Stephen Colbert, it seems more like he's this kid in a comedy candy store, like he just can't believe the stuff you guys get away with.
Yeah, I think we get to have a goofy time, and that's just so much more to me in my style of writing. It's just I would rather laugh at something than be angry at something, and for my personal style, and so I think that's why I fit well with the show.
Well, the nice thing is Stephen is playing a character, as we've said, versus Jon Stewart, who is not, and that does give us the creative freedom to go in all different directions, and ultimately makes it really fun.
Let's go on to the character comics as you did, and say the fourth one you wouldn't know. the blue hippopotamus.
Oh,
It's
that's
a
not
little
me?
Danish reference. This used to be a character running around ranting right-wing stuff, beating people with a club. But he's sort of a character comic. So the three other people are Opus. Can you tell us who they are?
Yeah, Larry David and Sacha Baron Cohen and Gary Shandling.
Gary Chandler as Larry Sanders. He used to have this pioneering mock talk show.
Yeah.
And how would you compare? Because Stephen Colbert is a character comic as well.
He is. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of those people, Larry David, and I don't know the hippo personally. I apologize for slandering his or her character. But Larry David and Larry Sanders and Gary Shandling, very similar. I think Stephen is obviously playing a character named Stephen Colbert, and his name is Stephen Colbert, and there is this sort of gray area as to people aren't quite sure who they're interacting with, and I think that's true with a lot of those people. It's not.
Is that true behind the scenes as well? Does he ever sort of go off into a character color and rant, or
he tries on things. We're working on a show, or we're working on a script, and so it's interesting when you get to his voice sort of just changes a little bit. He slips into character and tries it out and sees how it goes, but it's never frightening. Not in my job interview, it was frightening, and then after that, it's not frightening.
But it's always, the rest of the time, it's very clear who
Yes.
who is speaking to you.
right? So, but originally his name was Stephen Colbert, I guess, right? He was from South Carolina, and so it's sort of there's that slight distinction between the real Stephen Colbert and the Colbert.
Except that the one thing he did, decide to have his name pronounced Colbert early on, around college.
Yeah. Even before he came to the...
Yeah.
Correct. So it wasn't for the show. It was preceded it. Yes.
Okay, last category are the zanies and the goofballs. I think he's reminiscent of Groucho in some ways because he's insulting people and he's very bright and, how do you feel
I
about
like
it?
to think, there's always like a Margaret Dumont like off camera clutching her pearls every time Stephen says something slightly ridiculous. Both of those people puncture sort of the pompousness of society to somewhat, and I realize by saying something like puncture the pompousness of society, I am the pompousness of society.
Yes.
But when we do it well, we get to do that as well.
And like a third category could be ranters like Henry Rollins, Dennis Leary, Dennis Miller for the wit maybe. How would you relate him to those guys?
I think less so. I mean, I feel like we were saying, it's more of a playful thing, and if he's ranting, he's more playing at ranting.
It's closer to poetry than actual ranting.
Yes, or performance art, as we sometimes say around the office.
All right.
And also before he interviews everyone on the show, he does talk to them and remind them and says, I'm a well-intentioned idiot, so please disabuse me of my, ignorance. And I think, that's important to remember is that, he does sort of hide behind that ignorance.
And so that's how you actually, before he talks to the guests and sort of as himself and talks about the character and what he's going to do. Is that the way you go about it?
He does. He has a brief conversation, again, because he, always wants people to be clear on who his character is. He's never looking to be the Trojan horse or, surprise people. And so he has that very brief conversation out of character, and then, the show begins.
I guess that's one of the secrets of the show. Also, he seems like a very nice guy. Beneath all of this, he doesn't have sort of he's not sinister as like a Bill Hicks comic or something. Someone who actually hated people. he really seems to enjoy himself.
Yeah, I think he definitely enjoys himself. And I think that comes across. I don't think he could be saying some of the ridiculous things he says if he wasn't. If there wasn't a core of genuinely nice guy there, because you'd be like, oh, that guy again. But instead, you're like, aha, it's my friend.
So, what are the best guests on the show? What sort of guests do you think works the best?
I mean, it depends on your definition of the best, because it could be the best, meaning Stephen gets to skewer them in a way that is amazing, or it could be the best in that they just have a good play back and forth. So I'm not quite sure.
Well, I think that, when looking to book guests, our talent producer does, look for people, first and foremost, that have a strong opinion. And I think that, is essentially what makes a successful exchange. That Stephen is able to
so they sort
play
of
off.
Equal in some sense.
Correct. That he's so opinionated and they're opinionated, and he can, they can go back and forth on a particular topic in a comedic way.
We actually have a clip of the thing you talked about just earlier, Meredith, about how you brief people. This is John Kerry, who you might have remembered. He came quite close to becoming the president, I guess, and I don't know what he's doing now. Maybe he's at the In-N-Out Burger. That's what happens to some of these people. But let's show the clip of how he meets with John Kerry and how he briefs in on what's going to go on down in the show. Do they ever join the lie?
Everyone does. What we're doing is it's a big game, and everyone. That's one of the things that every once in a while it amazes me that we'll have on a John Kerry, and essentially they'll walk on and just be like, "Yes, you are a real news pundit, and I am on a real news show, and I'm going to respond to you as if that is all true." There's only a couple of times that I've ever seen anyone try and be like, "Well, this is a joke," and the entire audience goes, "Ooh," and we
sacrilege.
Usually find a way to shut that down and get that out of there, because everyone on the show, watching the show, is sort of playing along, and everyone gets to play the same game. We talk a lot about things in improv terms around the office, and everyone gets to sort of play in the same scene as Stephen, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why it's so engaging, is that as an audience member, you're also part of this game of pretending that this is all a real thing.
So I guess that's quite brave of some of the guests, especially the politicians, that they actually go on. But I guess they also go on because it makes them cool to be on the Stephen Colbert show, I suppose.
I would agree with that. I think they're very brave. I would not want to be interviewed by Stephen Colbert, and I've worked with him for 8 years. But it does make them cool. I mean, Henry Kissinger, for example, said, this is the one show, I've been on, a million shows, this is one show where my grandchildren think, I'm cool. So.
That's pretty
And the other wonderful thing is, as Opus said, is that people are playing along in this game. And the nice thing is that it's, almost every time it's successful and the person has fun and they come back. That's, the true testament. We did a bit with Bill Clinton and he came back for more.
That's nice. That's really nice. So how protective are you of the character? Not as much as seems when he sort of goes on other talk shows. It's a little bit, it's not like, I remember talking to Michael Parkinson, the British talk show host, when Sacha Baron Cohen came on the show. He came on as Ali G, and it was all scripted stuff. He didn't want to go on as himself. But I guess Stephen Colbert does that sort of.
He does on occasion. He very often, he does go on shows very often as his character, as he did when he testified before Congress. But he has on occasion gone on, sort of decided to slip out of character and talk as himself occasionally.
Like his sister ran for office somewhere in South Carolina, I guess?
Carolina.
And he sort of came out to promote her a little bit, or at least.
But he did that as a brother. I mean, that was, a very conscious decision to support his sister. And so he, certainly he's well known and he's, famous for his television show. But that was from the beginning,
Did you get elected, by the way? Did she win her office?
No, she did not.
Oh, she didn't?
She did not.
All right. I want to talk to you about
Awkward.
Sorry?
Awkward.
Well, yes. Sorry. Well, next 4 years maybe she'll do. I want to talk to you about events and specials, because I think that's one of the sort of the specialties that came out of this Colbert Report, and some of the stuff you guys must think, this is amazing, we can get away with this. I mean, the stuff you get Colbert's name on and things. Just describe some of the projects you've had that are sort of a little bit out of the ordinary, which are quite a few.
I mean, I literally have that moment every year or so at the show. Like, I started in 2008, and then about a year later, I was along with Meredith and a bunch of other intrepid people, we were in Baghdad doing a week of shows for the troops that were over there, and I was saying to myself, what? I am in Baghdad? Okay. And that was weird. And then like a year or two later, I was on the mall with doing the joint rally we did with the Daily Show people, and there's 200,000 people, and I am equally flabbergasted. And a couple of years after that, or maybe a month before that, Congress. We do weird things, is what I'm saying.
And
it surprises me, and I think it surprises all of us.
He ran for president of South Carolina?
He ran for president a couple times, of South Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a Colbert thing on one of the space station, is that right?
There was a treadmill named after him.
Yes.
The treadmill is named after Colbert.
Yeah,
on the space station.
There was an online contest to name a node of this space station, and of course, the fans took over, and Stephen won, and then they said, well, we can't give that to you, but we will give you, like, this treadmill, which is it's ridiculous either way, which I think is what's fun about it.
You're right.
It's silly.
And the most amazing thing was probably that thing on the mall you were talking about. Could you explain a little? This is called the Rally to Restore Sanity and/or Fear.
Yes.
Was sort of the thing. Explain what that means.
Well, we had two separate rallies. Well, it was a sort of a joint storyline between our show and The Daily Show. John wanted to promote to restore sanity. He wanted a rally to restore sanity, and we wanted a march to promote fear. And then Stephen didn't get his permits in time, and so he begged John so he could be a part of his rally, and so it became the Rally to Restore Sanity and/or Fear. And it was one of those moments, like I was talking about the improv thing, where everybody there is in agreement, and people came from across the country and across the world in costumes with signs, just all to be playing the same game of supporting this idea.
And we have a clip of this. The mall we're actually talking. This is D.C. Mm-hmm. This is the mall. This is where Martin Luther King had a dream. This is where a lot of stuff happened. I'm sure Simon and Garfunkel performed at one point. And this 200,000 people came out for this. Let's take a look at the Rally to Restore Sanity and/or Fear. You guys won. Congratulations.
We did.
Fear is on the rise. That must have been a pretty good day at the office for you guys.
Yeah, that was pretty stellar for me. It was an interesting. I mean, Meredith, the amount of work that it took to get just the logistics of it down was staggering, and luckily I had nothing to do with any of that. So it was fun for me because I didn't have to do the real work.
So how did you did you have an office pool of how many people would turn up? Or how many did you think?
I was surprised at the number. I mean, the estimates are anywhere from 200,000 to even more. The subway system sort of got shut down at one point. There were so many people, but it was just wonderful to see people out there. 5-year-olds and 75-year-olds. All enjoying the show. And the nice thing, too, is that in terms of logistics, we did it together with The Daily Show, so for once we could split the work.
Uh-huh. Right. That's a nice thing. So how do you decide which events to go along with? What are the kind of events that you sort of think work?
Well, it's very, what's nice about our show is it's always organic, and that's a word Stephen uses. For example, we went and covered the Vancouver Olympics, and which is hard to do when people plan to cover Olympics, at least 4 years ahead of time, and we decided 2 months before to actually go there. Needless to say, there were no hotel rooms. But, really, that's an example where we had seen a story about the U.S. speed skating team had lost their sponsorship. And, as you can imagine, an entire team needs a lot of money to train and do everything they need. And so Stephen decided, well, we will get the Colbert Nation, which is, something that's also unique about our show, is that Stephen's following is, as I think you've referenced, it is a cult following, even more so than a Letterman or another show that's successful. His fans, care about what he cares about, and they do what he says, and he takes that, very seriously. So he said, let's get the Colbert Nation to, not the show itself to pay out this money, but to raise money from all the fans out there who want to support this team. And, so he put out this call to the fans, and they responded, and we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think like $300,000, and that went to the speed skating team. And then Steven, of course, inserted himself even more into the reality by going and practicing with the team and becoming the team manager. And it was just a wonderful example where again, our show inserts itself into reality, and then it's so much more fun to see things from the inside and make the comedy that way.
It's quite impressive how you sort of impacted society, I think. You must have been amazed quite a few times of sort of what it led to out in society.
Well, it's led to interesting things in terms of like the comedy in our show. Like, I don't think we've ever attempted to go out and impact anything other than the funny. You know what I mean? We're not out there like, well, we're going to save those polar bears, goddammit. No, we're not pushing an agenda other than trying to do something entertaining. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it is successful, is because when we do stuff like insert ourselves into the speed skating thing, the entirety of it is to promote Steven and his main character in the show, and it's never about anything other than that character, and everyone just plays along with that game.
And one of the strange things that did happen, though, anyway, was that he was called to a congressional hearing. You have to explain why you would call a comic character into a congressional hearing, which is, I suppose, a pretty serious matter. Yes, yeah. I mean, he had done it. He had done a piece. There was a congresswoman who had done a series of was trying to raise awareness of migrant farm workers and how much work they do, and she was running this program called Take Our Jobs, is that what it was called, I believe? And it was basically inviting anyone to come down and do the work of a migrant field worker for a day, which is awful, backbreaking work that when they say it's work that Americans don't want to do, it really is. You don't want to work for 16 hours in the sun picking lettuce. So Stephen went down there, did it for a field piece that was very funny, and then a few months later she asked Stephen to come and talk about it in front of Congress. And so organically, he said yes, and things got weird. And they know that, and how weird they got is we actually have a clip of this, and you can, in the background, you can spot an unbearded Opus Moreschi, I think, making sure, hoping that the jokes go down. You take a look. Here's a congressional hearing with Stephen Colbert as a witness. So, were you happy with the delivery there? That was pretty good. I'm always pretty happy with the delivery, Stephen. If Stephen doesn't sell a joke, it's but I went down there with Meredith Scardino, who's a writer on the show. Stephen asked us to go. We had worked on the speech with him, and he asked us to go down there because he was going to be doing some back and forth. He didn't know exactly what was going to be happening. He is the quickest person on his feet, and we ended up doing nothing other than sitting behind him. But it was a delightful experience. And he said, like, I don't want it to look like I brought a bunch of people down just to laugh at me. So just be cool. And so I took that to mean like dress up and shave and look very nerdy and just sit there stone-faced. And there was a TV in the room, and if I sat up really straight, I looked at the monitor and it cut me off right here, and I was like, perfect. Now it's like no one's going to pay any attention to me, and it's all going to be about Stephen and the thing. And unfortunately, the monitor in the room was not what was going on C-SPAN, and so as you saw, and everyone else saw, instead it just looked like I was like right behind his shoulder the entire time, peeking my head up, and then also not smiling at all. And so there was all of these internet comments about that jerk behind Stephen Colbert, and what an asshole he is for not laughing. So that was me. That's funny. So they didn't seem that happy. Some of them were like, and some were very different reactions.
I think it was controversial.
Yeah.
The fact is, Stephen was invited by this congresswoman, and he made it very clear, again, as he always does, that he would be coming in character. So again, there was no, it was not meant to foil anyone. He said, this is how I will come down, and they said great. And then afterwards, there was a mixed response that people felt. We should, we were making fun of the process of Congress, and I think we did,
Do you think you're going to be invited back sometime?
No, I don't think. No.
Probably not.
Someone else pointed out afterwards that Elmo at one point testified before Congress,
So it's
and
still a step up.
I think Elmo was in character as well. I don't know for sure if it was Elmo the person
sort of
or
hate
Elmo
to
the
see
character.
the real Elmo, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was all above board the entire time, and it was interesting because we actually played that tape back to an audience a little while later, and the audience in our studio seemed to like it a lot more than the congressman from Ohio did, or Iowa, sorry, Representative King.
Pretty cool fan to have on the show.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. The phone Stephen was using is actually my phone because he, as habit, takes all of his stuff out of his pockets before he goes on a stage. And I was supposed to remind him to make sure he didn't take his phone out of his pocket, and I did not do that. And so he's on stage with President Clinton, and we didn't show this obviously on the TV show, but he realized he didn't have his phone, and he kind of saw me off. He's like, "Oh, can you bring your phone up and log in?" And so I have my boss and the President of the United States waiting for me to log in on my phone to Twitter, which is a lot of pressure. The keyboard is really small. And I managed to do it and hand it off. It went really well. And I think that's just an example of someone willing to play along in our silly game. And it's the President of the United States.
Right, and it's not easy to convince Bill Clinton to do something that's, undignified. He takes that very seriously. His dignity.
I guess not.
But Stephen will take all the undignifiedness of any given situation. It's usually about him looking. The best guests in terms of coming off well are the ones that do exactly as he told John Kerry. Honestly, try and disavow him of his ignorance, and they remain smart people, and he looks like a goofball. And the best guests, whatever political side, are the ones that do that.
And now you can probably get pretty much anyone to go on the show, I guess.
Not Daft Punk.
Not Daft Punk, but Paul McCartney you had on.
Yes.
Paul McCartney.
He's up there. Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you about this idea of this being a cult show, which it obviously is, and for good reason. And the way we could do that was I actually looked up what is a cult in a religious cult, and we could sort of compare are there any things. So if we had the slide on religious cults, and we can try and decide if they sort of apply to the Colbert Report. If one of you could read out the first one and comment on it if you think it sort of fits.
Oh,
this is this is from the American Family Foundation, whatever that is, but some sort of objective hold on this.
All right. The group is focused on a living leader to whom members seem to display excessive zealousness, unquestioning commitment.
How would you think that it would apply for the show?
I mean, I think it does in a small way.
Yeah, but it's not. It's sort of tongue in cheek. You know what I mean? Like it's like everyone's like, oh yeah, we'll do anything for it. But it's all again part of the game.
I'm not trying to sort of expose your show as it's really called.
No, look,
I'm more trying to help these people make a cult TV show because that's a really nice thing to have sort of a cult instead of just viewers. You have followers. So maybe we can learn from some of these people on the bottom here.
What not to do. I think the nice thing about Stephen, and I think, I mean, he's an amazing person. He's an amazing comic. But the thing that I think people respect him and his audience respects him, and it's a very smart audience. And I think one of the reasons is because he is so respectful. He is so respectful of the people that work for him and certainly his guests. And, he was born and raised in South Carolina. He's this very Southern gentleman and always, very concerned that his guests have a good experience behind, the stage as well as on the stage. And I think that people, sense that, the fact that he is so respectful of his audience as well. And, again, the show is about comedy and making, the best jokes that can be made. But I think that, that respect comes through, and as a result, people, respect him in return and, and care about the things that he cares about.
Right.
Yes.
I think one of the things that also really worked for the show that makes it sort of into a cult is there's a lot of tradition, there's a lot of sort of things you have to be in on, like I think it's point 4, the mind-numbing techniques, you might call them, but some of the things that, like denunciation sessions, you can sort of see that happening in the show with a strong point of view about something, you know. So that sort of makes you into a follower if you believe that sort of denunciation.
Sure. And one of the things you said about sort of the sort of world of it was something that impressed me before I started working there, is that everybody, and I'm sure Meredith got a lot of this when it started up, was wondering how he was going to continue up this character more than a couple of weeks, because it's this invented thing, and how are you going to do that night after night? And I didn't even know, even though I was a big fan of his work on The Daily Show. And the way he did it was sort of counter to what I feel like a lot of TV shows do, which is to limit their characters. Like, you know, Homer Simpson got dumber and hungrier as the years went on until now he's just, you know, a big fat eating dumb thing. And I love The Simpsons. They're the best. But, you know, Steven instead decided to grow the world. And so everything that happened became a part of this thing. And so now we can talk about, you know, the congressional testimony or the rally or anything else. And it's sort of part of this world that we're building together. And so it got broader and broader and brought more people in because of that.
Here at the end, I'd like to ask you, we have a show in Denmark called the Night Shift with Anders Breinholt. This is the guy. And he's probably the closest we get to a show like the Colbert Report. So I asked him if he had any questions that they sort of struggle with in their daily lives. Now he gets a chance to ask you. The first question is this. Even though the Colbert Report is a satirical show, you have a very clear political point of view. In Denmark, we usually try and hide our standpoint and make fun of left and right in equal measure. Do you see any dangers in having a clear point of view, or is it primarily a strength in a fragmented TV environment?
Well, I would say that Stephen does, he's playing this conservative character, but the show itself does try to equally make fun of the left and the right. Really nothing is off limits. So I think that's a little bit of a misnomer about the show.
Yeah, we definitely go out of our way to try and make sure we're fair. And it's weird. We'll be doing a script about something silly, and then I'll just get into a serious conversation for 20 minutes to make sure work out the political things of it and make sure we're not just carrying water for anybody and making someone's argument for them. We really want to make sure we're not just providing one point of view. So I don't think we do, and we do relish the chances to kind of skewer any given side, as long as they're ridiculous, as long as they're putting themselves out there for skewering.
Right. Again, the focus is on the comedy and the ridiculousness, again, of whether you're a liberal or a conservative.
So you actually don't see it as a strong political point of view, the show?
No, besides that his character is playing this, conservative political figure, what comes out of his mouth is, it's probably equal.
Yeah.
All right, second question is, the Colbert Report seems to cater to well-educated viewers. Are you ever afraid of excluding the larger target groups of not-so-well-educated people? This is a presumption, maybe. I don't know, what kind of people...
I think it's a presumption in America as well, and I think we probably do, but at the same time, I always get amused because we have this... people think that we're this really... highfalutin educated show, and we write some of the dumbest jokes. We write some of the stupidest jokes about the most, the worst puns you could ever imagine. And it's, as long as it's funny and we're having a good time. It was a month or two in when I knew I was doing well as a writer, was when Stephen during rehearsal said one of my jokes and went, "That is so dumb." And he meant it as a total compliment. I was like, oh, yes, he called my joke dumb. Because we love to be dumb. We love to be goofy. And even though we love to be educated about it, the best thing we can ever do is be smart about a topic so that we can be dumb about it,
And there seems to be no end to what you can do with the show. It seems to have a really bright future. It must be a really cool, a fun show to work on. What's it like to work on the Colbert Report?
I hate it so much. I'm here to no. It is fun, and again, it takes me to places I never would imagine being, and so it's pretty fun, and it's fun to look forward to I don't even know what's next. That's what's fun about it.
Right. That's the wonderful thing is that, we don't allow ourselves to, stay within one framework, and, we're constantly open to whether it's taking the show different places or talking about different topics that come up. And it's a wonderful place to work. Absolutely, I would say, one of the best jobs in television.
And with those words, I wish you the best of luck. We'll have to follow the future of the show. Thanks a lot, Meredith Bennett and Opus Moreschi.
Thank you.